What's going on, YouTube? This your boy Haywood Haynes. It's another installment of Facts Over Feelings, possibly a three-part series. And first, I just wanted to say thanks, and I appreciate all the brothers and sisters who have already subscribed to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And in the meantime, just enjoy this video, and we're about to jump right into it. And also before I jump right into it, I just wanted to say, I apologize for the hiatus. I did promise some videos, but I had to, take some time. I was in a dispute with the mother of my children and of my child rather, and it just I had to be the bigger man and realize, like, look, it's this is not the time to be bickering and arguing. We need all the help that we can get around this, and especially if you have a common interest, and a very important one at that. And I love my son like more than I love myself, I can tell you that. So this is time for us to step up and be the men that our sisters require of us, to be the protectors that our families require of us, and to be the vanguard that the cosmos has ordained us to be. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. And I know, like we all know from what we've been hearing over the last month and a half or so since I've done my last video, is a lot of information. Much of it garbage. The other half hasn't been vetted enough. So let's jump right into it. And one of the things that was interesting to me, I was reading an article. It was the Business Insider. It was published at around 2017. Can't remember the guy who wrote the article, but he did reference the National Academy of Sciences. And one of the things that was interesting with the quote that they made, well, first, the title of the article was, "We are in the sixth wave." The sixth wave, he said. We are in the sixth wave of extinction. Now, most of us may be familiar with the first, which we know, the mass extinction. So it was like the sixth wave of mass extinction. Let me get that in there because that word is critical. Sixth wave of mass extinction. And the first one that I think that most people are familiar with, a lot of people don't believe that exists, but that's neither here nor there. We're not here to argue the merit. Let's just keep the information surface level to a degree so we don't have to get in debates and go off on tangents. But, the first mass extinction we know was supposedly the dinosaurs. But I was thinking, where was the second, third, fourth, and fifth? How we end up at the sixth? We ain't been keeping the right records. And so that was alarming to me because, like it said, the National Academy of Sciences had indicated in the article that since man has kept record, 50% of the animals known to him have already been extinct. Now there's 40% in the sixth wave that they said is in danger of mass extinction. So we have to look at those are animals and insects, and obviously including man. And one of the things that took me that I thought of was the colony collapse disorder, or I believe colony collapse phenomenon, or what it was termed in 2005, when you had whole colonies of bees just disappearing. The worker bees would not return back to the colony, and then they would leave the queen and a couple nurse bees to nurse the larvae with the immature bees, and the worker bees would be gone and wouldn't return back. So even postal workers were had the responsibility of delivering colonies back to bee farmers in order to take care of or to replace the bees that were lost or did not come back. Now there are theories as to a multitude of theories, and some say obviously it may be a collective assault, but that what they do think is that it was either parasites or viruses or pesticides. And some people also have indicated that it may be the cellular network, which are throwing bees off their paths, and not and they're losing their direction and not being able to make their way back to the colony. Now, my thing is this: we also know that in the backdrop, who do we have? We have a company called Monsanto, or or whatever. I don't even think that it should be the devil's minions around there that create these seeds, genetically modified organisms that will be the future of food production. Once all this is straightened and sorted out, because we know that they're not going to relieve any responsibility to Mother Nature. So it's just not by chance that something natural. Now, mind you, what they said, the bees we know are responsible for pollinating a lot of what we produce. In terms of as far as agricultural is concerned, and that's $15 billion that bees are responsible for. So that would be a tremendous blow. And like we've already heard the adage that no bees, no plants, no plants, no animals, no man. So this is why I say that you have to have a warlike mentality. Okay, this is the mentality that you have to have, and because you have to understand that, like they talked about, in which I don't even understand why this was not plastered on every news media outlet. If you have the scientific community coming together and stating that we're undergoing our sixth wave of extinction, of mass extinction, I think we need to know something about that. And I think it preps you, I think it prepares you a lot more, because then you begin to understand it's not about just you. This whole existence is in danger. So then I asked brothers and sisters, what are you begging to go back to? A sense of normalcy? Oh, we wanted to go back to normal. What was normal? Second class citizenship? Subjugated to a dilapidated healthcare system, a dilapidated educational system? That was what you wanted to go back to? Police brutality is what you wanted to go back to? That was normal to you? Man, your Stockholm syndrome kicking off tough, ain't it? You shouldn't have to worry about the acute respiratory syndrome. You should be worried about Stockholm syndrome. That's what you should be worried about. You see what I'm saying? And all the conflicting news reports, contradictory, reports put out by the media from the so-called reputable institutions that we're supposed to take, as obviously infallible sources, and yet we time has proven otherwise. So one of the things that kind of jumped out at me was and like I said, look, before I even say that, now mind you, some of the figures, 40%, like I think I mentioned that, but I just wanted to etch that in your brains, and so that you understand that and make that clear. 40% now, not the 50% that they had mentioned that are already extinct. The additional 40% of species that we know of now are in danger, and those are the ones that are not even on the endangered species list. You see what I'm saying? Get a grip, people. This is a war of the world on a whole different level. Not just what humans are concerned. We've always done that. We never even, counted the amount of devastation, or took into consideration the amount of devastation that comes from the impact from wars that occur between men and or nations, if you will. And so that has to be taken into consideration. But the thing that kind of jumped out at me first, that was alarming to me was, when I had read that, an article, well, actually I seen this one on YouTube, and it had to deal with, now mind you, he had articulated it as three separate cases, which gives you this impression that they're not related. Okay. But there was a U.S. attorney by the name of Andrew Lelling. Okay. The U.S. attorney of Massachusetts. What they had did is uncovered, and I'm pretty sure some of you are familiar with this information. They had uncovered an espionage ring. Well, just three separate cases of espionage. They want you to believe that they were unrelated. So let's just say that. So let's start it off with what they had given us, right? And then so they say one started, now mind you, because these codes, man, I taught you about 3, 6, and 9. 0 means nothing. Okay, so there's a 60-year-old professor from Harvard by the name of Charles Lieber. Now, what they tell us is that he was receiving money from the Chinese government up to in the amounts of $50,000 for to do research, and then he was awarded, or he was given $158,000 as well monthly for personal expenses by the Chinese. And then he was also receiving grants from the Department of Defense and also the National Institute of Health. Now, so that's where now when you hear that information, all of a sudden you say, oh man, this guy was working both sides, clearly a case of espionage. And so we never understand what that's the overplay for the underplay. We always have to understand from what we have seen historically that there's always a patsy. There's always going to be a Lee Harvey Oswald or a multitude of them. Okay. And then so what they do is he also articulates that there were two other Chinese nationals, mind you, again, separate cases. One Chinese nationalist was this, a female, 29 years old. Can't recall the names at the moment. If you want their names, just go ahead and do the research. It's available. But they say that this lady was working at Boston University, okay, and failed to mention that she was a lieutenant in the People's Liberation Army of China. All right, he said that she didn't put it on her visa, so we didn't know about it. And the other Chinese nationalist was working at Beth Israel Hospital, which is also in Massachusetts. So now all these cases are unrelated, but they're in the same state. All right, so that's what they want you to believe. Now, the thing is that stood out at me was that, okay, now mind you, what I say all the time, especially we have to go back to the mediums that they use to indoctrinate us heavily. And one of the programs that we're very familiar with, especially in the age of terrorism on forward, was this idea that they make a ton of movies like this where a CIA agent, an FBI agent, an NSA agent, somebody uncovers the truth, or somebody is hip to a villain who's about to, release a virus on the world and kill off half the population, or he got a hold of a nuke and is about to kill off, 3/4 of the world's population. It's always that narrative. You've even seen that in the movie Hobbs and Shaw as of recently. It's always that narrative. But yet, in reality, they're nowhere to be seen. You see what I'm saying? And this is what the problem that I have, because like we talked about before, we act like we're a country that's free, but all of a sudden we're placing a ton of responsibility on one man. We say, and they do it. And subliminally, this is what they do. They're prepping you. They're seeing if you're ready for a dictatorship. And obviously you are. Not to mention that we know that Trump's name in Gaelic, which is a Scottish dialect, it means world ruler. Donald means world ruler in Gaelic. Okay, so we've already known that. But see, what they do is they say, well, Trump didn't alert us. Okay, first of all, we're supposed to have a balance of powers, first and foremost. Okay, so which means we have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. Any one of those branches would have done well. We didn't care who we heard the information from. If we would have heard it from any one of them, that would have been sufficient for us. Why is it all on Trump? Matter of fact, what about the Alphabet Boys, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Department of Defense? We couldn't get one of the motherfuckers to tell us anything. Everything was on Trump. And every time the public, now mind you, they avoid public and congressional scrutiny because they have that power, all right? So, anytime that you press them for information, it might more than likely has to be in front of a congressional committee, but they can't scrutinize them. And then even when they do, they say, oh, that's a matter of national security. Okay, so when are you going to tell us? The whole world will have to be dead before you come with a piece of information? What do we employ you for? You're working off the taxpayers' dollars and you can't give us a shred of evidence of any shred of information? Everything is national security? This is where we should be upset. You understand what I'm saying? So, we're dealing with individuals who want to make it seem as if it's unrelated or they don't have the capabilities. Oh, she didn't put it on her visa, so we didn't know she was a lieutenant of the People's Liberation Army of China. What? Did she change her name? Did she change up her whole identity? Did she come in a whole bodysuit? I mean, get the hell out of here. You telling me that just because she didn't put it on her visa, the CIA, the NSA didn't know who this chick was? That's what I'm saying. Get out of, see, there has to be a patsy. There has to be a fall guy. And then so even we can't even trust the president. If you are a believer that this guy, because I've heard from some individuals within the truth community or conscious community that, Trump is working, alongside to take down the deep state and the deep state did blah, 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 blah. But then one day he comes on the news talking about how he's a champion of liberation, how he approves of the protests from multiple states, especially like ones here in Michigan and Washington and stuff like that. And that, then he gets on the news, has a news conference the next day and says that he doesn't approve of the governor of Georgia relieving restrictions or relieving the strength of restrictions on his citizens. And so it's like this wishy-washy individual that you get. He's just doing just enough to pacify you. So and that's what I think a lot of people are tired of. So they're not getting the right feel off of the from what they're observing and what they feel the behavior is from the so-called POTUS or the person in charge, if you will, and the most powerful man on earth. Come on, man, we got to relieve ourselves of that garbage. And the thing is that in addition to that, we've been hearing other things. We've been hearing that it was two doctors who may have been the colleagues of the doctor who was considered to be a whistleblower in Wuhan and ended up passing away in the first week of February. And these two colleagues, supposedly as the mainstream media wanted to report, may have been subject to inhumane treatment by the government because they had woke up dark skinned. And to their horror, quote unquote, and not in their worst nightmare had they ever would have thought that they would have woken up like this. You see what I'm saying? And somebody in the comment section told me, I was like, oh, hey, well, you're overreacting. It probably has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the coronavirus. No, it has everything to do with race. Race is always in the backdrop, unfortunately, and always in the forefront, in every position for that matter. And the reality of it is that if it had nothing to do with race, you would have known from what you have been able to readily observe of the information that you had taken in from that segment was what? That obviously, if they had the coronavirus and they were being treated, and then they said that they were undergoing treatment, then the first thing that should jump out at you, since we know that they don't have a vaccine, and if they do, there would be an experimental vaccine. And anytime you take an experimental vaccine, anytime you take any medicine that is experimental in nature in any regard, you know that you may have to be ready for side effects. Okay, and if the side effect is being black, so what? You know that there are certain drugs out there called YHK that helps to alleviate the symptoms associated with cirrhosis of the liver, because that's usually what is called the lipatic phase, where they, the darkening of the skin, and those disorders are associated with the cirrhosis of the liver. And so that probably could have came about with, obvious, with bad interactions with medications, and but that could be alleviated. And so when you tell me that they woke up and we didn't see them on any respirators, that they're fine, because we know that obviously corona is a deadly respiratory illness, as they have said. So with that being said, we know for a fact that these individuals were pointing toward, they were obviously, it was a humiliation ritual, or either way it go, we know that something is not right. All right. And if, as long as they were, somehow being, getting better, then that's just what it is. You can't sit up here and say that there was ill intent on, on the part of the doctors, if they're working with experimental medication or an experimental vaccine. Because supposedly, according to you guys, all this is new, right? We've seen this disease evolve, just like how we've seen HIV evolve. So it's the same thing. And one of the other things that jumped out at me, because I'm gonna speed along just to get to the point on a lot of this, is that when you're dealing with individuals that lie so much, and you're receiving contradictory information from so-called reliable sources, this is what accounts for the frustration and the high level of fear. Now, when you had the guy named Rick Bright, which is supposed to be the leader for vaccine research for the United States, get fired recently by Trump, then he wants to usher in an investigative committee so that he could, figure out what really actually went on, and how he's like, oh, an uproar, this is an injustice, I'm trying to do the best for the American people. And what I wanted to find out was the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine. Now, this is the thing. If you want to find out how effective hydroxychloroquine could be, then come up with a better excuse. I don't think that was a valid excuse. Why? Because just from simple research, you would know, and this is surface level research, this isn't even really too deep, you would know that hydroxychloroquine was approved by the FDA. No, that's not a reputable organization. We're just saying for the sake of, what's going on. They work apart with these same organizations, so they're reputable to them. So the FDA had considered, hydroxychloroquine safe for use since 1955. All right. Now, not to mention that the World Health Organization, all right, had considered this to be on their essential medication list. It's called their EML. All right. Now, the EML list states that these drugs are very safe and effective for use in emergency situations for the healthcare system. All right. Now, not to mention that in 2016, 155 countries had also adopted or mimicked or emulated that, the steps that the World Health Organization had taken in terms of the medications that they would put on their list. And they considered hydroxychloroquine to also be an essential medication. And so it's like, if it's been used since 1955, and if we believe in all of this different stuff, if that is something that could be an option, then why do you need more research? And don't you think that it's better than a fly-by-night vaccine that has been possibly, like we said, already been prepared? But let's say in the event that it's actually a process that is happening organically. This is something that, I think will cause a little bit more fear, and people might be a little bit more reluctant to take, is considering the fact that we know it's purely experimental. That has been tried and true, considering the fact that they said that it will relieve the symptoms in patients 100% in 6 days. So that's a lot better than an experimental vaccine, if you will. And not to mention that, you had the hot mic situation in the White House briefing room, where there were two individuals talking about the infection rate versus the death toll, and how it may be a hoax, yada yada, and that we already got our vaccine. This is where all this confusion comes in. And then they're telling the American people, oh, it's overall. All the people who are saying that it's a hoax, and all the people who are not taking it seriously, shame on you. No, shame on you. You're doing that. You're doing that. Just like we talked about how with HIV, how it started off with Margaret Hackler, or whatever her name was, along with Dr. Robert Gallo in 1984, came on the news and said that HIV was what caused AIDS, without any scientific documents backing up that claim whatsoever. And see, this is what they're able to get away with. You see, and they knew if they were able to do that, then Lord knows what else that they would be able to get away with. You see, because like we said, that there needs to undergo a paradigm shift. As long as our science controls our worldview, then all of this can become a reality. Where do you think they're going to stop? You see what I'm saying? So, that type of behavior, it just goes to show that we're not doing our due diligence in terms of analyzing the information that we're given, because comprehension goes a long way into garnering clarity. And if you can't comprehend what it is that you're taking in, then of course you're not going to retain the information, let alone it's not going to have the impact, the desirable impact, which would give you the leverage needed to succeed in times like this. Okay. And so that's what's critical to our understanding. So when we have individuals out there that put out this information that it causes us to be confused, we have to know this is all by design, order out of chaos, right? So one thing that we have to be knowledgeable of is that now we look toward our brothers and sisters, to do a great job in embedding this information before they disseminate it to the public. It was something alarming too as well. Like I told our brothers and sisters, even when people are like, oh, well, 5G and all this different stuff, I was like, I'm not so much worried about 5G. It's just like, I'm worried about some of the other things that's been going on now. Now, we know that lecture that Bill Gates had conducted on TED Talks was in around, like, I believe 2015, right? And then what happens? He talked about, he warned us of a pandemic. We wasn't ready, all right? Now, it's ironic that there's a guy by the name of Sam. He's part of some group called the Helena Group, okay? In 2017, he also had a lecture that said there will be a catastrophic blackout that we're not ready for. Did you hear me, brothers and sisters? A catastrophic blackout that we're not ready for. In his lecture, he detailed that in about a month's time, with food shortages and disease and obviously tribal warfare, that the population will be cut in half in a month. Now, this guy's think tank is full of individuals who are Nobel laureates, billionaires, biologists, chemists, people from all walks of life that he claimed is working in our favor. Do you believe that? That's for you to believe. I will leave you to be the judge on that. You understand what I'm saying? So this is what we have to prepare ourselves for. That's why I'm always a champion of telling, just like I told the mother of my child, I said, when you get your money, I don't care what you do, but I want you to make sure that you get an emergency bag for you. Myself, I even have two here for me, him, and also her, but with supplies in it. We talking about like those life straws and batteries and flashlights and knives and like we say, emergency supplies, things that that you would need just in case you would have to leave your house or that there was some sort of natural disaster too as well, because those are all the things that we know that we have to prepare for. This is what the so-called quote-unquote apocalypse is really all about. This is be multifaceted in this approach. It just won't be one thing that will destabilize us. And for a fact, if we see people going over the edge now just off the virus, imagine if in addition to that, like we said, you couple that with a natural disaster, or you couple that with a blackout, you're talking about straight pandemonium. Now everything goes out the window. You see, and it would never return to normal after that. And we know about their numbers, 3, 6, and 9. That's what we talked about. These people, oh, well, yeah, if Trump would have got us the information. Remember, we talked about those other branches of government. We talked about all these alphabet boys. They're also culpable too as well. They have a responsibility to alert the American public, okay? But they did not. And then when they did get a hold of the information in January and February, what was going on? Oh, Kobe Bryant. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel, tragedy is a tragedy. Regardless if, like I said, it was... an effigy, or it was actually, him passing away. I'm not here to argue that point. What I am here to say is that I think that I would have rather had input on the coronavirus for the first 2 months of 2020 rather than what was going on with Kobe Bryant. That was a sad loss, but like we said, how devastating is it that we're unprepared? And we were unprepared because we left it up to our media and we left it up to our government, which we pay to protect us, which we feel that will protect us, and didn't live up to their job. And so they're responsible. You see what I'm saying? And they don't want to claim responsibility. Now they want to put it on you. You can stop the spread. It's you. It's your responsibility. You could infect. No, you. It was your responsibility. Because even with the quarantine, you see that there's a high rate of infections and they're so-called, according to them. And there's also, just an astronomical amount of deaths or deaths are getting into, according to them. Like we said, the deaths are rising to the point where it's prompting governors and it's prompting world governments to continue on with these draconian measures. And so when we look at the position that we're in, we have to say, okay, well, what are reliable sources of information? Only thing that we got is individuals who will become YouTube creators parroting what they hear from the media, not with the ability to analyze the information, break it down so that it becomes something that we can use, something that's tangible, because much of what we can use or much of what we hear, we can't really use, even with AIDS, it's ever evolving. Remember, like we talked about AIDS, HIV, first HIV started off as a gay man disease. The first patient zero was was a European individual who worked as an airline, a stewardess for an airline, and then began to, obviously interact with gay men. And that's how it became known as a gay disease after supposedly it came from a monkey, but it became known as a gay disease, and they actually called it GRID, gay-related infectious disease. Okay, then when they found that it was I believe a leukemia patient or that acquired the disease, and all of a sudden they said, oh, well, okay, heterosexuals can acquire the disease. Then it went from a heterosexual disease to a black disease. Now you have the top 16 countries in the world all being in Africa with the highest number of HIV infection. How did that happen? Same way it happened to us. How it started from supposedly unsanitary conditions in meat markets, and the Chinese got it, and then the Chinese, and from there it spread to European nations and over to the United States. And then now all of a sudden it's a black disease. Now it disproportionately affects blacks, which sets the table for what? Africa being decimated, because then they have the highest number of cases of HIV infection, as we stated before, which does what? We talked about how the coronavirus, or they told us how this virus, disproportionately affects those with compromised immune systems. So we must know that that's coming. And they know, and they're trying to prepare for it because they know what the end game is. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why, like I said, we have to do our due diligence. We can't just take what they tell us as for face value. We must do some digging, and that's where, like I said, we come in. Brothers and sisters, we have to have a war mentality and understand that you are at war. Like they said, this is the sixth wave of mass extinction. Okay. So get out of this, like I said, prepare yourself and be in the mindset that they are going through systematically eliminating, not just you, anything on this planet that they feel is outside of the control. Everything they want to control. They can't control Mother Nature. You see what I'm saying? So when will they stop? H1N1, H5N6, because mind you, for that H and that 9, there's 16 different versions of H and 9 different versions of N. So you could have H5N4, the new Ebola 3, HIV 5. You don't know what they're going to come up with. When will it stop? Because you've already adopted their science, their worldview, that these things, are out of control, and we're not ready for the next pandemic, and so forth and so on. And so what you had was just like Governor Cuomo in New York. They had done an experiment on 3,000 individuals, an antibody test, 3,000 individuals, and they said 13% of them, there goes that number again, and 3,000, mind you, the zero means nothing. And so they said that from those numbers, it must be 2.7 million New Yorkers that's infected, that already have antibodies, that's naturally immune now. And so what do they say though? Their excuse still is, we don't care if you are asymptomatic and not showing any symptoms. You got it, but remember what I told you in the last video, you will have it. Because, we'll talk a little bit about that in the second video of, we'll brush over some of the things that we talked about from the video I did initially on the coronavirus. But, the point being is that that was the thing. How do we now reformat and now turn the science of virology and turn the science of immunology over on its head, and now say, oh, okay, but still you may need a vaccine. Well, the vaccine is designed to create antibodies. Okay, if I already do that, why would I need a vaccine? Never ask yourself that question, because we don't care. Fear disallows you to see what's right in front of your face. And see, they're able to get away with something like this. And now and then you have the issue of contact tracing, where they have this app that they said that South Korea has already employed. Now you already know it's coming, because this is a world objective. So in order to complete that objective, they'll show you different places that have already incorporated it and say, oh yeah, these individuals are doing it correctly, and they're taking the necessary measures in order to reopen society and get it to where it needs to be, which is just an extreme surveillance state, right? To where supposedly if you come into contact with 6 feet within someone who's supposedly infected by coronavirus, then they will alert you and then tell you to go home and self-quarantine, and then more than likely somebody will meet you at your house. Okay? See, this is all invasive, and we know this. This all challenges our fundamental freedoms. But yet, one of the things is that we don't know how to react because we don't have the mental preparation. We have to prepare ourselves. Remember, we talked about some of our, I hate to bring sports analogies into this, but it's something that we're familiar with as Americans. We see how our favorite teams, our favorite sports stars are. They get, before a game, whether they get pumped, they get mentally prepared. You see what I'm saying? And this is exactly what we do. If you're not mentally prepared, I don't care what you got or what you intend on doing, it's not going to work out. We need to be mentally prepared. We need to have a war mentality, because they've been telling you they're at war with you. You're just confused about what side of the fence that you're on. Once you become aware that you're facing the barrel and not behind the gun, okay, now you know. All right. So we're going to get into part 2 real quick. Holla at your boy.